Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Chuggu Podcast. My name is Thomas Durning, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Pearse McLaughlin. Hello, Pearse.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. So, on today's podcast, we will be reacting to last weekend's Rangers versus Celtic match, reacting to Barcelona winning La Liga, previewing this week's Champions League matches, and at the end of the podcast, Pearse will be giving a rundown of all the latest Asian football news. So coming up next, we will be reacting to last weekend's Rangers versus Celtic match. So on Saturday, the 13th of May, Rangers defeated Celtic 3-0 in the final Glasgow Derby of the season. So although the league is already decided, this means that this was Rangers' first win over Celtic this season. So Pearse, what was your reaction to this result?
Um, I think it was one I kind of expected before the game even started. Because I watched the press conference from Ange Postecoglou the day before, and he seemed a bit far too relaxed. And when you get that message across to your players that your manager's relaxed before probably the biggest derby game in world football. And obviously, you knew Rangers were right up for it because Michael Beale wanted to make sure he got a win over Celtic to get that monkey off his back. Because obviously, it'd been nearly, I think it's like 3 or 4 attempts that he hadn't won a game. But now Rangers are straight at the blocks, and then Celtic just never got going. And I felt as if Celtic, you look at obviously, you kind of, from their perspective, it's a dead rubber, but for the fans in across the world, it's not a dead rubber. Like, these games mean everything, and I just felt as if when you looked at the lineups as well, like, the back four of Celtic, the back four are like the backup options, you would say, because Kobayashi, Bernabe, Ralston aren't your normal back fours usually. Carter Vickers, Starfelt, Greg Taylor, and Johnson at right back. But regardless, still had a lot of experienced players in that part. Callum McGregor, Rio Tati, Matt O'Reilly. And I felt as if, like, from the Celtic perspective, that a lot of the fringe players that you think, oh, they're great squad players, maybe they're not cut out for starting week in, week out, and that's probably why Ange has a preferred lineup. It doesn't really rotate that too often because obviously we touched on it last week in the podcast that Turnbull and Abad had 25 sub appearances this season, but not many starts because when they do, they usually don't perform. And from the Rangers' perspective, I think it will give their fans real hope and optimism going into next season that they can maybe push on with a few additions. And obviously, I think it's like that's what Rangers need. Rangers need that, like, physicality, and obviously they had all the supporters behind them as well, so that kind of helped as well. But like I said, they probably need to do it when it's the pressure's turned up full volume. But it's slightly turned down for Celtic's perspective, but Rangers took full advantage and they deserved a 3-0 win, and Celtic never looked as if they were going to score, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, first of all, it was probably deserved by Rangers. They totally deserved to win the game. They were much better throughout the 90 minutes. Even before the match, although the title's already decided and Celtic have already won it, I knew that Rangers would be desperate to win that game because obviously, they haven't won against Celtic all season. It's been a really disappointing season for them. They're at home, so in front of all the fans, so I knew they would be really, really up for it. And like I knew Celtic would make changes, but like as you said, before the game started, when I saw the lineup from Celtic, I kind of knew that this could be a bit of a tough afternoon for them. And as expected, Rangers came out the blocks. They were really pushing for that goal. They got that goal in the first 10 minutes of the match, and I just felt when that first goal went in, after the first goal went in, Celtic kind of kept the ball. That they kind of grew into the game, thinking that there could be something they could get a goal back, and then Rangers got their second goal, And I just felt after that, the game, Celtic kind of, they kind of chucked it mentally. I think you could see from the reaction that, I don't think they had enough in them to get the game back. And, Rangers fully deserved it. Just touching on, obviously, the changes that Postecoglou made to the lineup. There was Bernabe that came in for Taylor and Kobayashi. He started. And, these kind of first two examples, I don't think they really took their chance. It's a tough game for them, obviously, going to a place like Ibrox. It's a really hostile place, but I don't think they really took the chance. And there was players there that started their first match in this derby, and it didn't really happen for them. So fully deserved by Rangers. We totally deserved it. So I was going to ask you, what impressed you most about Rangers, and where did you think it went wrong for Celtic at the weekend?
For Rangers, I think what impressed me was the high intensity from midfield, and they've got runners all over the place. And it's just that they just looked a lot sharper than they had in previous games, and I don't think they feared Celtic. I think they smelt blood as soon as they got that early goal, and then they just went for it, and they ran out comfortable 3-0 winners. Obviously, they seen Celtic maybe a bit of wounded animal, but a different story when like Carter Vickers at the back, and obviously the full back four. But regardless, that midfield is probably one of the strongest midfields Celtic can actually field. So it's only maybe like a few minor changes in attack to front. Obviously, Kyogo goes well, but still, I thought Cantwell impressed me. I thought he was lively. He looked as if he just had a point to prove. And every time he went forward, he looked lively and as if he could score. And I think you can probably see Rangers try to bleed in the new blood for next season. Obviously, they dropped Alan McGregor as well. And I think, obviously, I think they're trying to wean out like Morelos and Kent, so they're trying to like, obviously get players back like Hadji back as well and stuff like that as well. So I think it's impressive like, in terms of the next season and when for Rangers if they get the recruitment right, but that's all down to they getting the recruitment right and getting some big wages off the wage bill as well. But for Celtic, what disappointed me the most with Celtic was it's some points they're architects of their own downfall. Like you've seen the first goal, for example, Yuki Kobayashi just unaware of Cantwell is in terms of like John Lundstrom, it's a shot for edge of the box. Joe Hart pushed it back into a dangerous area, which is a goalkeeper, and experienced goalkeeper such as himself, he should never be doing. But as a defensive unit, you should always be level with your defensive partner. But it was like probably 2 or 3 years behind, and just played everyone on side and just unaware, and that's just schoolboy errors to be honest. And then obviously the third goal for Sakala, someone like Callum McGregor who's very experienced, who's been so consistent this season for club and country. Him and Starfelt both been consistent, to be honest, both dilly-dallied the ball and then just gifted Rangers a goal. And you don't need to gift Rangers anything because although they have been poor in these fixtures this season, it has been slim margins. And the fact is, when you gift them a goal, it's just schoolboy, to be honest. But that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the game just came down to one simple, word, just energy.
Energy.
I just felt Rangers, they had, they had so much energy in the game. They were really pressing well. They pressed high up the pitch. Every time one Celtic player had the ball, there was 3, 4 Rangers players surrounding the ball, trying to win it back high up the pitch. There was lots of runners. One thing about Rangers that I kind of noticed was that a lot of the players, well, the team that started, it kind of looked like a team that were going to be there next season. So, for example, the goalkeeper, the forward line with Matondo, Sakala, and Cantwell. the midfield as well, and Yilmaz at left back who started. A lot of these players will be here next season, and it just kind of, to me, it just kind of looked like they were there to make a point that next season we're here, we're going to do everything we can to make next season a better season. And I just felt for the first time this season from Rangers, I just felt that their energy was different. They were much more positive. And that was a big thing for me. And for Celtic, it was just a lack of energy, in my opinion. I just felt that the game, they kind of just let the game drift. There was like, they kind of had that mentality of it doesn't really matter. So they just kind of let the game drift. There was no real intensity, and especially the second half didn't really do anything. It wasn't really, there was no real part to play. They kind of let the game go. And yeah, energy. I just felt the big thing at the weekend was energy between both the teams. And yeah, once again, totally deserved win for Rangers. Um, so we will now move on to discussing Barcelona winning the La Liga title. So on Sunday, the 14th of May, Barcelona defeated Espanyol 4-2, which meant that Barcelona won the title for the first time in 4 years. So Pearse, what was your reaction to Barcelona winning the title?
I think that was thoroughly deserved. They've been the most consistent side in La Liga this season. There was a point where Real Madrid at the start of the season absolutely destroyed Barcelona at the Bernabeu, and they were, I think, maybe 6, 7 points clear. And since then, Real Madrid were dropping points needlessly, and Barcelona were just slowly just picking up, and then they just went on a run where they get dumped out of the cup, dumped out of Europe, surprisingly, but domestically they've been so consistent, and they've just been like peerless at times. To be honest, like the defense is so solid, they concede the least goals, and up front they're just so exciting to watch when you've got players like Ousmane Dembele, Rafinha, Lewandowski, Ansu Fati, Ferran Torres, Gavi, Pedri, De Jong. The list goes on. Like they've got so many options and from middle to front, and the fact is, they thoroughly deserve to be champions, and it's been a long time coming, and you can finally see that things are starting to click under Xavi, and you can see he's going to be a top class manager. I think next season for him it's just about maybe kicking on in Europe, because I think in Europe he's had some disappointing results, especially going out to the group stage at Champions League. That's something that just doesn't happen at Barcelona, because Barcelona, let's be honest, there's as a elite club. It's up there with Real Madrid, but Real Madrid obviously have that kind of, although they've been waning domestically in Europe, they've been pretty consistent. And that's been the difference this season, I think. But Barcelona just been so consistent this season, and the fact is to win it on to confirm champions against your greatest rivals. It's pretty mad, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. No, everything you said, thoroughly deserved. They've kind of ran away with it. This season. It's been kind of champions elect for quite a while now. Xavi is, well, let's be honest, it's been a tough few years for Barca. Losing Messi. The European record's been really bad. But as you said, Xavi's, he's really turned it around at Barcelona. They seem to be kind of getting back to the way that they always played. You can see that style of play that Xavi was used to when he was at Barcelona, and he's kind of implementing it at Barca now. Um, uh, but no, it's fully deserved. You touched on it about their defensive record. I mean, their defensive record it's insane. I mean, it's been absolutely amazing all season. And they've hardly conceded. I think away at home at the new camp, I think they've hardly conceded any goals. I'm sure they've only conceded a handful of goals from open play at home, which is, I mean, that's just amazing. And you don't. The best way to win a title is by having a good defense, and Barca have shown that You know, they've been a prime example. You know, defensively they've been rock solid all season. You know that the forward players have been really good. You know, Rafinha's been really impressive since he joined last summer. Um, you know, Lewandowski, he's done a good job since he's joined. And yeah, obviously we heard last week or this week that Sergio Busquets is leaving. So that's a really good centre for him because he's been an unbelievable player for Barca in his time. Um, so no, thoroughly deserved. You know, Real Madrid. I mean, we all know who Real Madrid are, how good Real Madrid are, but they seem to have quite a while now. I think they've kind of switched off from the league and just said, right, we'll just concentrate in the Champions League now. So I think that's kind of taking the pressure a bit off of Barca. You know, the fact that I think they've kind of known that Real Madrid haven't really pushed it in the league. No, but really impressive from Barca. Fully deserved the title. So what do you think's next for Barca? What do you think next season they look at? What do you think they need to do, and where do you think they need to uh, where they need to improve?
Well, they're going to have I think they're going to have another major overhaul in players in terms of, I think, because they're not out of the financial difficulty in terms of the wages expenditure. They still need to cut down wages. They're also going to lose big wages in Sergio Busquets, an iconic member of that Barcelona team. And that's now the last surviving member gone of Pep Guardiola's side that won the Champions League in 2011. Um, but that's a major void to fill. And also, I think there are talks about maybe trying to get rid of Jordi Alba as well. Maybe obviously try to bring Messi back, but how they're going to do that, we don't know. So they'll still they'll probably try to sell some assets that they've got, because if you can get Lionel Messi back with the team he's got, with the young blood coming through, um, some exciting times, because Barcelona under Xavi, even though they have been quite, let's be honest, terrible in Europe, but fantastic this season in La Liga. Yes, he's continued to bleed in new players, because you've got Balde at left back, who's just displaced Jordi Alba, who's a club legend and probably one of the best left backs in Barcelona's history. Um, Players like that, and I think there was a 16-year-old that made a debut fairly recently as well. Can't remember his name, but he was quite exciting young winger as well. And you've got Ansu Fati, so they've got a lot of young talent, young assets that have came through La Masia at a time that Barcelona were struggling, and under Bartomeu, when they were spending obscene amount of money that's kind of put them in this kind of hot water. They were stopping producing players, you know, and now they're starting to produce players, I think, more out of necessity, but the fact is they're actually good enough to make an impact in the team. You look at some of the best players, you probably say the two best players probably, like you're talking about Gavi and Pedri. Like, these two guys are probably good in most teams' starting 11s around world football. Um, but I think next season would be, I think Real Madrid will come back next season in terms of La Liga. It won't be this easy. Because like you say, I think it's probably from January, February onwards, it's pretty much a formality that Barca just picked up results. Real Madrid were just kind of winning, losing, winning, losing, winning, drawing. It's like inconsistent, because obviously they're so focused on the Champions League. But as you've seen in one-off games, Real Madrid can beat Barcelona. They've done it in the Copa del Rey, where they shocked everyone 3-0. But that's not happened to Barcelona because they have been fantastic defensively, and that was a shock across the world, because Real Madrid at that time weren't playing great. But that just shows you they can turn it on any time. But I think next season for Barcelona to improve will be improve their squad, and I think make a real stamp in the Champions League.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. My first thought about where they need to improve is Champions League. You know, it's been really disappointing for them in the Champions League the last few years. So they need to kind of get back to showing, you know, the whole Europe that they're a force to be reckoned with, and even try. They probably won't win it next season in the Champions League, but even try and show that they are capable of winning it. So that's where I think they need to improve. But um, you know, you were touching there on the youth players that are coming through. I mean, that's one thing from Xavi that you really have to praise. You know, they've kind of got that back in terms of bleeding in players from the famous academy that they've got. You know, they kind of lost that. They kind of started going a different way the last few years in terms of spending big money, but Xavi seems to have brought that back, which is, you know, really good to see. Um, you know, it could be exciting for Barca next season with Messi. Potentially, it kind of looks like that he's going to return, because I think it's kind of all but confirmed that he's going to be leaving PSG in the summer. So I think him come back to Barcelona does look likely. You know, I think Busquets is partly to do with that. I think because Busquets is leaving, you know, they can get his wage bill off the you know, get his wage bill off, and you know, kind of come up with a plan to show the Liga that they can afford for Messi to come back. I think everyone wants to see that. That'd be amazing to see Messi coming back to Barca and hopefully, you know, retiring at the club that everybody knows him for. So, you know, no, it's good times for Barca coming up. You know, obviously uh, got their title back, and you know, a lot of exciting young players coming through, and obviously with the potential return of Messi. So, no, it's looking really positive for Barca at the moment. So we will now move on to discussing this week's Champions League semi-final matches. So last week, the results of the first leg of the Champions League semi-final matches last week were Real Madrid 1, Man City 1, and AC Milan 0, Inter Milan 2. So we'll start off with discussing the AC Milan versus Inter Milan match. So Pearse, what was your reaction to the first leg, and how do you think the second leg will play out?
I was shocked because I did call AC Milan because although they both share the stadium, they were had the allocation of the more fans in the stadium because they were the home side for the first leg, and I thought Inter Milan were absolutely outstanding. I thought it was a very professional performance, and they created chance after chance. It could have been more. We got the two early goals and kind of sat on the lead, and they never looked troubled in any shape or form at the back. And with them winning 2-0, I think that might be a bit too much for AC Milan. And with AC Milan losing at the weekend as well, 2-0 to Monza, and then having to apologise to the fans, they've been nothing short of woeful since the return of the World Cup in Serie A. Apart from a few decent results here and there, somewhat Real Madrid, to be honest, in a way. They're in the semi-final of the Champions League on merit, but I do think this second leg is going to be an absolute blockbuster. I think it'll be high scoring. Both sides will score. I think, although Inter Milan will have more fans, slightly more fans in the stadium, I don't really think that will be a major aspect in the tie. But I do think that Inter Milan will score first, and then AC Milan have just got nothing to lose. Throw the kitchen sink at it. I think they'll get two goals, and then I think Inter will just hit them on the break towards the end, and I think it'll be a 2-2 draw with, I think, Inter going through 4-2 in the aggregate to the Champions League final. For the first time since they won it back in 2010 under Jose Mourinho. But I do think Inter just look a bit more streetwise, and you're starting to see players like Romelu Lukaku in form again. In the midfield, I just think there's just a really, really solid midfield in terms of Brozovic, Hakan Çalhanoğlu, and Nico Barella. I just think that Inter will just have a bit too much, and obviously AC Milan just hitting out of form at the wrong time for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just briefly discussing the first leg. I think the first leg was all about the start of the match. In the first leg, you know, AC Milan, start of that match, they were absolutely terrible. You know, they conceded two very early goals, and it could have been more than that. Could have been about four goals in the first 20 minutes for Inter Milan. You know, AC Milan got off to such a bad start. You know, they did improve as the match went on, but the damage was already done. You know, 2-0 to Inter Milan, that's a great scoreline, especially going back to the stadium that they already played at last week. You know, I can't see AC Milan turning that around. You know, as you said, they got beat at the weekend against they got beat the weekend. A really poor result. They don't seem to be in a good place at the moment. Inter Milan, you know, they seem to have kind of picked up form. And yeah, I just can't see it. I just think that Milan will have too much for AC Milan. I just think defensively, AC Milan at the moment are really poor. I just don't think they're capable of, you know, not keeping a clean sheet. Um, so yeah, no, I think in Milan, I'd be really shocked. I mean, AC Milan, they're capable of doing it. They can do it, but I just can't see it. I think in Milan, 2-0 is a really good scoreline, and yeah, I think they'll go to the Champions League final. Um, so we'll now discuss the other semi-final, which is between Real Madrid and Man City. So the last week, the first leg ended 1-1. So Pearse, what was your reaction to the first leg, and how do you think the second leg will play out?
I think I'm a bit more open. I think both sides were a bit pragmatic. Two wonder goals, to be honest. What first one from Vinicius Junior, and then obviously Kevin De Bruyne. Both get that quality in them because it's unlike Vinicius Junior to pick up pockets in the middle of the park. Usually he's out wide, and then he just took one touch out his feet and just rocketed it right in the top corner. Not quite top corner, but he rocketed it. Decent finish. You'd expect maybe Courtois to save that pass. I was touching on last week in the podcast. I think Courtois saves that, but Ederson just isn't as big in his command and his goal. And De Bruyne just showed his quality. But I do think both sides, on the balance of play, with his chance created, I do think it was a fair result in the end. I think Man City probably started the better side in the first half. And then I think in the second half, Real Madrid edged it. Because the first half, I think it was a statistic that Real Madrid did 32% possession in the first half with one shot, and they scored it. So that was the difference. Real Madrid are happy to concede possession, although at that time Man City didn't really create anything because obviously we touched on that Rudiger was starting ahead of Militao because he was suspended for the first leg, and he absolutely man-marked Erling Haaland at the game. So the players like your Jack Grealish, your Kevin De Bruyne, and Bernardo Silva were the most creative aspects in the team. And basically just kind of nullified Erling Haaland to me, so just had maybe Scott Carson up front. Because the fact is, like, a Militao just kind of stuck to him. Because most defences this season have just not been able to cope with a guy that scored 50 goals this season. But he just stuck to him like glue and just never let him move. And it worked. And it'd be interesting to see though in the second leg though, because I think it will be a different ballgame completely. And obviously Real Madrid will have Militao back as well. It was interesting to see how they shape up in terms of formation and personnel. And obviously, Man City rested a lot of players at the weekend, so did Real Madrid. So both will be fully fit, raring to go, and I do think they're an absolute blockbuster. I would edge slightly towards Real Madrid, just because of that experience. But you can never question what the quality Man City have, and you wouldn't be surprised if they went on and progressed to the final as well, because they've got that quality to do it with their own fans behind them. But it's one of the ones that's like a 50-50 call. It's like too hard to call. Like if Real Madrid lost the first leg, you'd say Man City most likely in the final. But I think the secret's a draw, and both sides look pretty fairly well matched. And you'd expect, like we said at last week's podcast, this should be the final match, but unfortunately, it's a semi-final. One of the big boys has to go out. But it's too tough to call it. I would say Real just slightly edge it, but I just too tough to call. Two fantastic sides. That's going to be an entertaining match.
Yep. First leg, just touching on the first leg, it was such a good match, brilliant match to watch. Two quality teams. Two amazing goals. Real Madrid's first goal, Vinicius, what a finish that was, and same with De Bruyne. Two amazing goals. You know, I felt Man City were better in first half, second half. I felt Real Madrid were better. But 1-1, I mean, it sets up to be an absolute amazing second leg. I agree with you. It's going to be so open. It'll be a very open match. Both teams will go for it. I mean, it's so hard to call because they're two amazing teams. If I had to choose, I'd say Man City, just based on the quality, just based on the quality they've got, and also in the moment they're in. That they'll be not they'll be on such a high. Obviously, with Arsenal kind of losing, and which means Man City are only one win away from winning the title. They'll be such in good confidence. And although Erling Haaland was really quiet last week, he couldn't get into the game at all. He is still such a threat, and he can turn up when he wants to. So I'll say Man City will edge the game and probably get to the final, but I'll absolutely never rule out Real Madrid. They're more than capable. They've got the quality. But it's going to be a brilliant match. I can't wait for it. And really exciting second leg. So for the final part of the show, Pearse will now give his Asian football roundup.
Yeah, so we're going to kick off with the Japanese football news. So on Friday, there was a match between FC Tokyo where they defeated Kawasaki Frontale 2-1. I've done a match report of that. It's on the Football Chuggu website. On Saturday, we had Vissel Kobe beating Sanfrecce Hiroshima 2-0. Shonan Bellmare beat Hokkaido, lost 2. Shonan Bellmare 2, Hokkaido Sapporo 4. Casio Reysol 0, Yokohama FC 1. And then on Sunday, we had Albirex Niigata 2, Yokohama F Mariners 1, Kashi Antlers 2, Nagoya Grampus 0, Kyoto Sangan 0, Ceres Osaka 1, Avispa Fukuoka 0, Sagan Tucson 0, Urare Diamonds, fresh off their UEFA Asian Champions League victory, back in league duty, beating Gambo Osaka 3-1. So it's leaving the table looking pretty interested at the top of the table. Vissel Kobe, 13 games, 29 points. You've got Yokohama Mariners behind them on 24. Then third and fourth place, Nagoya Grampus and Sanfrecce Hiroshima, all both on 23 points, but with Sanfrecce Hiroshima only played 12 games. And down at the bottom of the table, you've got Shonan Bellmare in 15th, played 12 games, get 11 points. Kishi Reysol, 16th place, with 11 points after 13 matches. And then Yokohama FC, 9 points in 17th, and then Gambo Osaka at the foot of the table on 7 points. In terms of the Korean League, so that kicked off on Saturday. So Pohang Steelers beating Daejeon Hana Citizen 3-2, Gwangju losing 2-0 to Daegu FC, Gangwon losing 2-0 to Suwon Samsung Blue Wings. And then on Sunday we had Ulsan Hyundai 3, FC Seoul 2, Incheon United 0, Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors 0. And then it rounded off with Suwon FC 0, Jeju United 5. So at the top of the table, you had Ulsan Hyundai, 13 games played, 34 points, and they're kind of creating a gap. And obviously, they played FC Seoul at the weekend there and managed to defeat them and putting more distance between them and the rest of the pack. So you had FC Seoul second, 23 points, Jeju United third with 23 points, and Pohang Steelers fourth with 23 points after 13 matches all played. So it's kind of, you can see the gap there between the top and the second kind of place teams fighting for that second spot. And down at the foot of the table, we've got 10th place, Incheon United, 13 games played, 13 points, Gangwon in 11th with 10 points, and then at the foot of the table, Suwon, Samsung Blue Wings with 8 points. A bit of breaking news as well. We've got Son Jun-ho, a South Korean midfielder based in China, is under investigation by the Chinese police for unspecified reasons. The South Korean embassy in China, Beijing, mentioned on Monday. It wasn't immediately clear whether Son, who plays for Shandong Taishan FC in the Chinese Super League, had been investigated as a witness or a suspect in the case, but Chinese media have reported that Son and other Shandong players have been questioned about match-fixing allegations surrounding their head coach, Hao Wei. Son, 31, has been playing for Shandong since 2020-21, a season after winning the MVP in the top South Korean league, K-League 1, under Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors. The midfielder's earned 20 caps for South Korea and has played in 3 of the 4 matches at the FIFA World Cup in Qatar last year. And that's all your Asian football news.
Thank you, Pearse. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the Football Chuggu Podcast. This podcast will be available to listen to on the Football Chuggu YouTube channel and also the Football Chuggu website. Thanks for listening and see you soon.
Bye-bye.